My name is Ben Lousia, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the AAC Spotlight Virtual Event Series, Managing the Agri-Food Sector in Unprecedented Times. Today's edition, titled The Crucial Role of Agtech, will address the undeniable reality that we need to produce more with less, therefore pushing innovation in food production. There's a clear opportunity here for both companies and technology providers, as well as investors, to not just help revolutionize Africa's agri-food supply chain system, but to tap into a potentially lucrative market. The implementation of technology into the agri-food sector was crucial before the crisis. However, the world looks a much different place today than it did 3 months ago. The crisis is now putting pressure on the industry to redefine its farming and food supply chains to accelerate the pace at which it commercializes and adopts agri-tech innovations to deliver sustainable change. Today's session will address how agtech is enabling safe sale and supply of fresh food during this pandemic, the rising challenge and coming up with creative offerings. Obviously, there are few silver lining amid the pandemic devastation, and food security insights and foresights to ensure Africa's agricultural productivity. Before I hand over to Louisa to moderate the session, I would like to thank all our partners, our sponsors, our speakers, and all the participants from across the globe for their support and commitment to keeping our network and overall agri-food community informed and engaged. Just a few housekeeping rules to allow everyone to have a great experience. Before we actually go into our official plenary, you are now watching the plenary, wherever you are in the world. And after the plenary, we will have a 5-minute break, and then we will go into the 3 parallel sessions. To enter the sessions, click on the session button, and then you can click on whichever session you would like to participate. And once you access that session, you will be able to see speakers and presenters. Please take note of the session times. It's very important. And once you're in a session, you can double click on a presenter or a presentation to enlarge your screen. And feel free to switch between different sessions. Please use the chat functionality to share your comments, questions, especially when you are in a specific sessions, and those questions will go directly to the presenter, and speakers themselves will be able to see your questions. And just as courtesy, all the sessions are recorded and will be available on the African Agri Council website. After the sessions, you can join the networking functionality. Simply click on the networking button and you will be able to interact with participants. We've arranged for our system to allow a 3-minute slot between interactions with other participants. And if you would like to exchange contact details, please click on the connect button. And the contact details of the said person will be loaded into your Hopin account. All you have to do to access those contact details is to log into your Hopin account and go into the connection tab, and you will be able to see all the contact details available there. We have a poll running, and we would like to encourage everyone to take part into the poll and give us your insights and your answers. We'll greatly appreciate, and the polls will run throughout the session and the conference itself. And lastly, but not least, we would like to encourage all our participants to please visit our booth. We have 3 exhibitors with us with amazing offerings. And for each participant, please, once you visit your booth, an exhibitor booth, please type the word AAC into the chat section. And by typing that word AAC, you will be able to receive a 6 months complimentary membership to the AAC. And the membership will allow you to access the recorded videos of this event, the previous event, and the upcoming events. Without any further delays, I'd like to invite Louisa to take the stage. Louisa is from AgFunder, Louisa, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. And hi to my panelists, Anita and Tatiana. This is the first time we're meeting, the new way of meeting. I know Mark relatively well, but I'd love to start if you could all introduce yourselves and your organization, maybe starting with you, Tatiana, as I know I have not come across the ELIM group yet, so would love to hear what you guys are up to.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, for the invitation to share our experience here with you and to meet each one of you, from which I believe I'll learn quite a lot. We are the ELIM group. We started actually a company 13 years ago, which is ELIM Services, it is a consulting firm in the agriculture sector. So we started in the agricultural sector, but we have actually branched to different things, doing consulting work from feasibility studies to monitoring evaluation work. Today, not only in the agricultural sector, but health, education, all the different things. As we grew and did a lot of studies and suggestions and recommendations for our clients, we realized that, clients and sometimes are hesitant to invest in some of the things that we are suggesting. So we say, okay, fine, but you need to invest more into agricultural input supply in the rural areas and so forth. And they're like, yeah, that definitely is what needs to be done. But, so we said, okay, fine. So let's also start a firm that focuses on agricultural investment. So that is Mutiana. It's a second company. So we have Mutiana Investimentos, which focuses a lot on the investment from production. I'm a farmer, so we have agricultural production. We have also rural shops where we provide agricultural inputs and extension services to farmers in the rural areas, really deep down there that no one wants to go. That's where we focus in. And we also have a company, one of our companies also focuses on agricultural fresh produce. So right now with COVID, everybody at home, they're getting produce from our farms, and also associate farmers. They're getting all that at their homes through our water company. And we also have a logistics firm. So we kind of have like 4 or 5 companies in the group, and and that's what we're doing, and also focusing a lot on technology to ensure that we deliver the services in the different companies to our customers. Mm-hmm. That's in a nutshell. That's it. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Or like maybe to say that I'm an agricultural economist by training and an animal scientist, so that comes naturally for me in the in the sector, to work in the sector. But I also love technology, so my phone is on my hand all the time.
Yes, sounds like you're very busy and operating throughout the supply chain, all the way from farm to fork. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Mark, why don't you tell everyone about Omnivore?
Sure. So Omnivore is a venture capital firm. We are based in India, and we fund entrepreneurs building the future of agriculture and food systems. We've been in the agri-tech space for a while now. I'm sort of shocked. It's basically been a decade since we first got started. We helped to pioneer agri-tech in India and develop that ecosystem from its earliest days to where it is today. It's been a exciting, frustrating, at times frustrating and somewhat exhausting journey, but on the other side of it, we find ourselves in India having built an ecosystem with huge participation now from generalist VCs, from strategic corporates, and from impact investors. And I think the reason I'm here today, because to be clear, while I have spent some time living and working in Lagos, I am by no means an expert on African agri-tech, is to kind of talk about the lessons that we've learned over the last decade building the Indian ecosystem and how they could be relevant in the African ecosystem.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's why I suggested, I didn't want to call you a veteran of ag tech because it might show your age a little bit, but but I think you can certainly say that you've been around for a while.
The gray hair and the lack of it shows my age.
Right, you've certainly been around, and it's been great to, you know, you have lots of insights on how ag tech has developed overall globally, and as you say, some interesting, hopefully some insights for how it could develop in Africa. And before I get Anita to speak from WeFarm, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background on AgFunder, because there's a little precursor to the relationship with WeFarm. But AgFunder is a venture capital firm. So we invest in ag tech and food tech startups. And the way that we've built this business is through media and network effects. So we have a media arm, which is where I come in, called AgFunder News. We post news, articles, research reports about food tech and ag tech globally. And then with that network, we have also raised our venture capital funds, and we invest in startups. And one of those startups that we have invested in is WeFarm. So there's just a disclosure for you there. So Anita, you're based out of the UK?
I am.
Is that right?
Yes, I'm based out of London, but we obviously are in East Africa with WeFarm. So we have offices in Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania. So WeFarm, our mission is really to be a global digital platform for small scale farmers. So what we have is basically a knowledge sharing platform. So that's peer-to-peer, farmers connecting with each other, sharing advice, sharing information. So that's already being used by over 2 million farmers in the countries we're in East Africa. And we really have ambitions to go much further. Obviously, knowledge sharing is the first step, but then we also are currently involved in a marketplace. So giving our farmers access to quality inputs at better prices, so better price and better quality. So really starting that marketplace vision as well, so that they can buy better. And then obviously the next step is where we're heading for the future, is also on the selling side and being able to sell smarter and really just leverage the combined community and kind of buying power and selling power that we're bringing together. And I think probably the only other thing, to add about WeFarm is technology-wise, our base is actually SMS technology. So we really wanted to start with something simple that farmers actually had widely available in the markets we're in, and that's really the base. But obviously, as far as technology, it's constantly evolving. So we're going to go from there.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's amazing how you started with that SMS function, and pretty much any phone can use WeFarm, can send SMS and get information back. Isn't that correct?
Exactly. So we have all kinds of farmer devices, obviously not all smart devices, and some of them even have keys missing, things like that. So if you remember what it's like to type in a question over SMS, send it off, and then obviously behind the scenes we have machine learning and really kind of matching the best people to respond back to the questions. So it's all kind of behind the scenes that we're playing that role.
Yes, and filling in some of the gaps, I think, if there are words missing or letters missing. I remember speaking to Kenny, your boss, and talking about how sometimes messages are just missing keywords, and you've managed to fill those in with your technology.
I think we have, language support in terms of machine learning for a couple of the languages, not just obviously English, but the local languages. Certainly where we are in Kenya and Uganda, also in Tanzania. So we can do a fair bit to sort of analyze and sort of detect, and we don't really change the wording, but absolutely in terms of understanding intent and what we do with those pieces of information to forward them on.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that obviously was something that was necessary. One of the big challenges with ag tech, all over the world, even over here in the US, but is adoption and actually getting these technologies into the hands of farmers. So I'd love to spend a bit of time talking about that. And maybe, Mark, you could start by sharing some insights about how you've seen adoption go in India. Obviously, it's a very different agricultural industry, but it's also made up of a vast majority of smallholder farmers. So how have the startups that you've invested in worked, in creative ways like WeFarm has, to make technologies accessible to smallholder farmers?
So I think that that answer is very much in flux. If I look at kind of the early days of agri-tech in India, which is to kind of say, 2011 to 2014 or 2015, smartphone penetration in rural India was negligible. 4G wasn't there. And we looked at startups that primarily had what I would characterize as B2B to F business models, business to farmer. So if we were going to, remember, India has 130 million smallholders, right? It is a staggering number. When you throw their families in, you're talking about 700 million people, more than half the population. And reaching those smallholders who have an average acreage of about 1.2 hectares per farmer was impossible. So the investments that we made early on were with technology companies, technology startups that reached those farmers by partnering with corporates, bringing solutions that the corporates themselves didn't have that could then scale to those farmers. And when I say corporates, I don't just mean big companies. I don't mean multinationals. I mean local companies, medium-sized companies, even cooperatives, right? A really good example of that is Stellapps, right? So Stellapps is a full-stack dairy tech company that was launched in 2012-13. Today, millions of farmers across India pour milk through the Stellapps stack, right? This essentially digitization of the milk collection layer in India. But Stellapps never went farm by farm by farm to go there. Instead, they went cooperative by corporate dairy by cooperative to get there. And basically convinced the cooperatives to allow them to start digitizing their collection centers. And so basically you had to work with points of aggregation to do that. Stellapps did that with dairy, with cooperatives and private dairies. Skymet did that with insurance companies and banks. A lot of our investments in those days were very much based on finding corporates who had done aggregation for you and accessing those farmers through the corporates. And anyway, ability to pay for the farmers was so difficult, right, at that point that going direct wasn't a great option. If I look at how things have evolved over the last few years, I would say there's sort of two trends that we're now seeing. First of all, there is a lot more direct to farmer outreach, and kind of two models for that. One is farmer platforms have been built that interface via smartphones, but oftentimes with local centers that are being developed by these startups, right? A really good example of that is TOUTED, where, to be clear for disclosure, AgFunder is an investor. And TOUTED is the largest farmer platform in India. We have about 400,000 farmers on this platform that are essentially getting inputs, getting support for market linkages, getting financial services, and getting advisory. But not all of it is smartphone interface. In villages across Bihar, UP, Jharkhand, and Orissa, you have little TOUTED centers and nodes that are being built that the farmers can go to, and there is someone with a smartphone, right? So they are digitized centers, but the idea is not that every farmer has to be directly plugged in, right? And that's a model that we're seeing in other ways, right? We've made an investment in a company called AquaConnect that's doing the same thing across India and Indonesia, but just in the aquaculture sector. And the final thing that's now viable and possible are direct to farmer models that are just predicated on smartphones, right? And obviously that's going to talk to the top, 10 to 20% of Indian farmers, but that's still, 15, 20 million farmers. It's a lot of people to deal with. And for example, we have an investment there called Fussell. Fussell is focused on premium horticulture farmers, folks that are growing, grapes and pomegranates and bananas and coffee and tea. These are not, they might be small farmers, but they're not subsistence farmers. And in order to do Fussell, in order to play that, it would be part of that system, right? You need drip irrigation and you need a smartphone. And if you don't, we're not really the product for you. So all of those different models, the B2B2C, right, direct to farmer with kind of a physical and digital model, and the purely digital, we're on sort of an evolution in that direction.
Mm-hmm. So Tatiana, throughout the supply chains that you work in, what is the adoption of technology been like, and how does what the other two are talking about resonate with you in terms of getting that adoption?
But if you want my take, I'll just give you my take in terms of technology use. Really, in terms of technology use in Mozambique, we are far behind most of the countries, to be honest with you, when it comes to technology. But it's being adopted very fast. People are taking it in, quite fast, and even in the rural areas, what we are seeing is that we have seen a move towards early that farmers are also interested in the new technology, especially when it comes to, for instance, mobile payments. Mobile payments are something that also are increasingly being used in the rural areas. And that all has to do with network. So the cell phone companies have invested, in the past 7 years, quite heavily in the rural areas, because they understand that those are the future consumers. The clients are they. So you do find, for instance, one of the cell phone companies invested when they came into Mozambique. They actually first wanted to invest in the rural areas before they invested much in the urban areas. Here in the urban areas, we are now beginning to consume their product. But in the rural areas, they've been there for quite a while. Almost everyone has a, I don't want to mention because there's no advertisement, right? But everybody has a phone number with the prefix. So it's that definitely, it's quite interesting, because it gives us now the ability to communicate with the farmer way before you say people don't have phones. People now have phones, and they even have simple phones, that enable them to answer their phone, to get SMSs where you actually communicate with the farmers. For instance, through our rural shops, all our shops have a phone number where the farmer can call in and expose his or her doubt or problem on the farm. Look, I have this problem. My crop is showing this, all that. And then our technician at the shop will then start assisting them through the phone. Okay, fine. Just tell me what's going on exactly. How often, when did this start, and all that. Okay, fine. So through the phone he gets the first service, and then he gets he can also communicate through SMS. We go to the shop, to the farm. We actually take GPS coordinates, which is also very important for us to get to know our client. So that information, and when you actually get to know your client to the detail of knowing where they are, that is something completely new in this market. Because but we are making that investment. We are going down there to get that, and as Tatiana, in the agro shops, that is what differentiates us in the market, because the client then comes and says, no, but they know me, they know what I buy every time I buy, because we also keep a database with all that they buy. They've got a loyalty card, and all those novelties keep the clients interested in continuing to buy. So. And that has also enticed other stakeholders in the market to partner with us. From input suppliers to let's say mobile money, all that. They all want to work with us because they understand that we have a database, and we use technology to attract the farmer to stay to be part of the model that we are working, and that also enables us to, for instance, to provide training, even if it's not a virtual training or communication like what we're doing right now, but through just a WhatsApp group, we use that to convey messages, to order, understand what the needs are in the market, the phone to be able to show pictures and small videos. For instance, we have a platform where we actually showcase best practice in the agricultural sector, which is called Mozagro Rural, and we have people subscribing to it. We have people watching our videos, so that is a novelty in this market, but it's slowly picking up, and it's coming through, and I think that's the most important thing is for you to adapt your product or your service to the needs and capabilities of the market that you are serving. So that's I think what I can share.
Yeah, so it sounds like quite simple solutions at this point, using apps. You mentioned, like WhatsApp, but also some of these payment systems. Who's providing the the payment technology? It's the cell providers. Oh, okay, we've lost it now.
Yeah. Actually, on that side as well, for us, we've seen the same with, obviously in Kenya, there's been a big investment in terms of mobile money. So that's something also that we are trialing with our farmers. And yeah, that infrastructure and a lot of that investment is coming from the telcos. And so that does make, a good starting point that farmers are familiar with, or at least our users.
Yeah, and what about, there's a few different technology startups across Africa and potentially in India that have been providing a technology, whether it's a solar-powered irrigation pump, and then they've realized that in order to get this technology into the hands of farmers, they've actually needed to provide some credit to enable them to purchase that technology. Are either of you working on, doing something in that fintech realm as a, a potential enabler or an adoption enabler of technologies?
I'll take first pass at that one in terms of WeFarm. So one of the things when I talked a bit about our marketplace, so what we're doing is obviously, we partner with brands and manufacturers of agricultural inputs and other things. And then also we have retailers on the ground who we actually partner with, to be the actual points where farmers can go and make those purchases. So particularly with the retailer side, that's the side where obviously, we've built actually a digital app, web app for them. So we can see all of the transactions coming through. And so from that's a really natural point to then start credit in terms of for the retailer. So we already know the transactions. We know, for example, payment flows and things like that. And then, it makes it a lot easier to have that structured data on what they're doing, and then actually be able to make lending decisions off of the back of that, whether that's through us or obviously through another partner and a third party in the credit space. So that's really where we're kind of taking it and starting with the retailer, and in the hope that also if we start with the retailer, that allows them to buy on better payment terms, things like that. And then also, the farmers should receive the end benefit of the retailers benefiting as well. So that's where we're starting.
Mm-hmm.
We've used various different models. So for you mentioned kind of solar pumps. So for things that are more CapEx intensive, there have been cases where the company itself has provided credit or shifted to a leasing model instead of an ownership model. So a really good example of that is EcoZen, right? EcoZen is micro cold storage systems that start the cold chain on the farm gate itself. And initially we were trying to sell them to farmers, really hard, pretty high CapEx point for what a smallholder can afford. Eventually we tied up with various lenders to provide financing, and that was okay, but it was fairly expensive financing. And increasingly, the way the company sells is they just lease, right? So they can get much cheaper financing than a farmer can get. And then in turn, they can provide effective lease terms. So that's one kind of fintech angle for us. The other is that many of the farmer platforms that we've been backing are tying up with financial institutions, large financial institutions, to bring financial inclusion directly to farmers. So that's certainly the case with TOUTED. That's becoming the case with Aqua Connect, and we've seen that across the portfolio. And then finally, there are some fintech first solutions that we're working on right now. We'll probably do a pure agri fintech deal a little later this year, and then we have some portfolio companies, for example, Bijak, where financial credit to the value chain is part of their business model. So looking at various different angles.
And Tatiana, before you dropped off, I was just inquiring about the mobile payment systems that you have been seeing used. Who's providing those? Is it the larger institutions, or are there some startup companies?
Mobile payments are really provided by the large institutions. The Vodacoms of this world, also the banks. Yeah, the banks also provide. They have their own systems as well. So, very little through startups. Actually, there was one that was starting that started working on. Didn't pick up. We have nothing is being used so far.
So, Anita, what are your impressions of the African Agtech startup ecosystem? You know, how many startups in the regions that you work in are there, and have you seen it grow at all since you've been working at WeFarm?
It's a good question, and I think in terms of number, I don't have probably an exact number, but I would say, you know, I've been at WeFarm probably almost a couple of years now, so it's fairly recent, but it feels like a long time as well. And definitely, I think what we're seeing is, you know, there are a lot of players that are in kind of various aspects of the supply chain. So some are actually kind of, you know, actually run by some of the bigger corporates, and they're kind of branching off into a space where they're kind of going a bit more from, you know, partnering with manufacturers and going down that way. So there's a lot, you know, of those kind of players. And then there's also, you know, some obviously, you know, more technology based players that are looking at, you know, I think as Mark pointed out, some more specific solutions for a targeted set of farmers or a targeted set of users. So we see some of those ones coming up in the countries we're in. And then also, I think, you know, the sort of bottoms up side and really aggregating the community, I think is, to be honest, we don't see as much in terms of that space, you know, that we're in with WeFarm. But I think there's lots of opportunities where people are playing in various spaces, and there's opportunities, I think, for partnerships, you know, even more so than sort of direct, you know, us competing against a lot of people.
Right. And I mean, obviously you're headquartered out of the UK, so it makes it, in terms of raising investment for your startup, I guess that makes it slightly different proposition to investors than if you were actually based in the countries in Africa in terms of risk profile. Do you see many other startups being headquartered in the UK or Europe and operating in Africa as well? Is that a typical model?
You know, it's interesting. I actually just talked to one a little while back that was looking at women's healthcare in Ghana, and they were obviously a couple of our talkers were based in France. So, you know, it definitely does happen. I don't have the sort of obviously exact numbers of how often, but I would say for, you know, for all these companies, I think, you know, definitely having the on the ground local base, I don't think you could ever go without that. So, you know, the majority or, you know, of our teams, obviously we have, you know, the on the ground field operations, marketing, all of those things that actually give us the confidence that we have enough feedback to build the right thing for our users. So definitely, I think, you know, I think what we have in London is probably the bit that allows us to then, you know, once we go outside of East Africa and things like that, you know, it makes it a good base to kind of have the learnings across multiple areas. But we definitely, you know, the local connection is just, it's a must to have that.
Yes, of course. And Mark, you know, in terms of, you know, in India, you think it's quite a decent ecosystem, I think, that you've built in India. Definitely the most developed agtech ecosystem for an emerging market globally. And you have a good, you know, a few local VCs that are focusing on investing in the space. You know, how has that built over the years, and what lessons could be learned for something, you know, to be set up in an African country?
So a couple of thoughts. So not all of this is a function. I would love to claim credit for all of this, but the reality is that India's had a pretty strong venture ecosystem since kind of the mid 2000s, right? So if you look at the history of venture investing in India, forget about impact investing, forget about agri-tech. Let's just talk about venture for a second. Essentially, you've always had these very strong linkages between Silicon Valley, where, I don't know, a quarter of the people working are probably of South Asian descent, and India, right? Because of the technology sector. So India got into the venture game well before it should have, right? Late 90s, first .com bubble, VCs get set up, crash and burn, totally wiped out, no one makes any money. And then in the mid 2000s, some of the veterans, not of venture investing at that time, but people that had set up startups that didn't fail, right? So for example, startups that were sold to eBay or Amazon or what have you, those people started launching venture funds. So you saw that with the rise of Nexus, you saw that with a venture fund called Helion, with Matrix's local activity, and many others. On top of that, because of the strong connections with the Valley, players like Sequoia and Excel entered India, some of the largest VC funds in the world. Now, let's be clear, none of these people touched ag in a major way for many years, really until about 2015, 16. But India's always had a strong venture ecosystem. India's also had a very, very strong ecosystem for agribusiness, right? I always tell people, look, we talk about it in agri-tech, the big four, okay, right? Corteva, Bayer, BASF, and Syngenta. Well, guess what? Number 5 is based in Bombay, right? It's called UPL. It's like 5 minutes from where I live, right? And they've grown through acquisition. They acquired Advanta, they acquired Arista most recently. If you look at tractor manufacturing, Mahindra isn't just the largest tractor company in India. By volume, it's the largest in the world. So we've had a strong venture ecosystem on one hand. We've had a very strong agribusiness ecosystem on the other hand, and that extends into things like food processing, right, seeds, and many other spaces. Honest to God, we just built on that, right? So a lot of our success was getting generalist VCs to pay attention to agri-tech, getting strategics to realize that agri-tech startups could fill in gaps because historically Indian strategics don't invest heavily in R&D. And then I think what supported us along the way was the rise of an impact investing ecosystem that paid more attention to agri than other investors earlier on. And so I think those 3 pieces helped tremendously. How does that apply to Africa? I would say a couple things. One, working with corporates is very, very key. And I would say especially local corporates. And so you don't necessarily have that in every market, right? But you've got flour mills of Nigeria, right? You've got players in the larger markets that are bigger agribusinesses that are probably worth partnering with. I think it's also very important to keep the generalists in the loop. They might not come in for a while, but eventually they will if they see that the opportunity is big enough. And impact investing ecosystems are really key. I think the biggest difference between the Indian venture ecosystem and the African agri-tech startup and venture ecosystem, and this is going to sound like a bad joke, is the average agri-tech entrepreneur I've met in Africa, unfortunately, looks like me. And that's more about a joke about the Kenyan ecosystem and what that place is like. But India is all locals, right? There's almost no expats. There are less than a handful of investors who are foreign. There are almost no foreign founders that I can think of. It's a massive domestic pool of talent. Now, you have people who've returned from abroad, certainly, and you have that in the African agri-tech ecosystem. But I think it's a very deep pool of talent that really helps us.
That's really interesting. It'd be great to just hear from you again, Mark. Sorry, but just thinking about how the ecosystem has developed in the different stages and thinking about it on the global stage as well. When we think about ag tech really came onto the scene globally, probably about 2013 when the Climate Corporation was sold to Monsanto for $1 billion. And you could say that the first wave of ag tech was a lot of sensors. Sensors and IoT, and then things have developed from there. Can you talk about the different kind of stages of ag tech in India and perhaps globally too?
I mean, I would say if I were to generalize ag tech in India, I would say there were sort of 3 waves of entrepreneurs, and I would look at it from an entrepreneurial perspective. The first wave were just crazy people, okay, right? Launching an agri-focused startup in India in 2010 or 11 or 12 just took guts. There was no obvious source of funding. And as a result, the people that did that tended to be just mavericks. We then saw kind of in the middle of the decade an influx of people with really strong corporate pedigrees that launched agri-tech businesses, most of them from the digital space as opposed to from an agri background. And I think in this new third wave that we're in, most of the good founders that we're backing came out of either existing agri-tech startups or generalist startups and are now applying their skills and talents and growth hacking and everything else to the agri-tech space. How has this impacted things thematically? I would say earlier on, a lot of the people that were founding agri-tech startups were more hardcore technologists. They were not thinking full stack, right? They were thinking, cool, I've spent many years at Wipro. I know how to make sensors work, right? Or I know how to do value-added services for non-smartphones, and they had a very technology-first kind of approach. I think what we're seeing now, because you have more people that are coming out of existing startups, is there's more of a focus on growth, there's more of a focus on full stack, and there's more of a focus, as opposed to technology, on product, right? On beautiful, beautiful products that are intuitive for users. That's kind of the trend that I've seen in India. I think globally, I think there was a massive wave of, I would agree with Louisa, there was sort of a massive wave of, I can give a farmer a sensor, and farmers got inundated with lots of incomplete piecemeal solutions. And I think now there's more of an understanding that whatever is brought to a farmer needs to be a more holistic, turnkey, intuitive, right, and frankly, fuller stack solution, because they simply don't have the bandwidth to operate multiple parallel systems.
Great, thank you, Mark. So there's something that we haven't actually spoken about, which is probably on many of our minds much of the day, which is the global pandemic, COVID-19. So we'd love to, for the last few minutes before we take Q&A, talk a bit about what's been the impact of that on your businesses, and what do you think the impact will be overall on food and agriculture in the markets where you're based? And are there technologies that could help? Overall, there's been discussion around labor shortages relating to the pandemic. Does that make robotics something that farmers are going to need to use more? Or the online marketplaces, digital solutions to helping you purchase the inputs that you need, or to market your grain, because you can't go to the physical markets like you used to. Tatiana, can you share a bit about what you see the impact being of the COVID-19 pandemic in Mozambique?
Yes, it's a reality. It's a global reality right now, and we all have to stay at home, independent of where you are. But so we, in the agricultural sector, we are an essential service. So if you're talking about the production, definitely we are still in the farm. We need to ensure that the people are able to eat. So we are actually increasing production, building greenhouses and all those things to ensure that we will be able to supply, because with the pandemic the borders have closed, and so we're not getting anything from South Africa, although they say food comes through, but not in the volumes that they used to, and South Africa needs to feed its people, so they are the first priority, so the region has to feed itself. So this is a good opportunity for the agricultural people in the agricultural sector, because we've been complaining that our produce is not valued. So now we have to invest more so that we can actually have our products in the shelves. So I always say to people, this is an opportunity, stop complaining, do something, produce more. So we are doing home delivery has shot up. I think we have 100% or more in terms of delivery. We are delivering like crazy. We've got up to 10, 11 p.m. So yeah, to our customers, because the demand is really huge. And I was also talking to another entrepreneur in Zimbabwe this month. Actually, just before we spoke, I was talking to an entrepreneur in Zimbabwe that also does home delivery, and he says he's doing like 1,000 deliveries a day. So that is really good. It's really good. And he was sharing that, look, the only problem is you having to invest rapidly in your logistics, and that's exactly what we've had to do, is increasing our logistics capacity to meet the demand. And so all that is definitely a challenge, but it's it's the good side of the bad situation, I can say it that way. And in the in the logistics, in terms of the inputs, the input business, we keep selling, but at the same time, we have seen that our input partners, they are struggling with having the product, in the right places, because of the logistics challenges and all that. But we are trying our best to ensure that the farmer has the seed to go and plant. So those have been kind of the challenges that we face, and we are a bit worried also about, for instance, crops, dry crops like cereals and so forth. What will happen because of the commercialization will start in the next month and a half. So, will we be able to sell? How will we be able to sell? For exports, all that. But it's a challenge. We are ready for it, and the market is definitely taking on. It's local producers are looking at this.
Great, thank you, Anita. So we spoke to you guys a couple of weeks back about the impact of COVID-19 on your business, and you were saying, well, there's actually been a bigger problem that you guys have been focused on, which has been the locust swarms. Have been absolutely devastating to many of your markets. So just tell us a bit about how WeFarm can respond to some of these crises.
Yeah, I mean, actually, just on, I'll start with that with similar themes, I think, to what Tatiana said in terms of, COVID and the impact on, obviously delivery and things like that. But I mean, in terms of the locusts, I mean, I think, the way we respond or can respond to a lot of these things, applies to other problems as well. So we obviously have a lot of the information coming in terms of, where people are asking these things, what they're asking about. I think with the data science that we have at our disposal, it's really, one of the things we can do is highlight, what people are talking about. We're talking about them, how do we actually share that information, get that to the right people to make decisions, and really just kind of that aggregated view of information that sometimes can almost predict what's happening next, where the trends are. And so it's really just in the amount of usage we have and being able to aggregate sort of those relevant trends out of that information, and then obviously kind of make the right decisions off the back of that, whether it's us or enabling third parties to then make those decisions. But I guess to answer the previous question as well briefly about COVID, then we found the same, where obviously in Kenya and Uganda and the countries we're in, agriculture is an essential service, but things are, we've talked to our retailers, and they are seeing less footfall, and there are more problems with distribution and some of the supply chains. So in other areas we've also tested out getting into ourselves, so working with local delivery providers and offering an incentive, for example, even looking into some of the logistics ourselves as well, of how we can actually aggregate demand from our various retailers and get into that aspect of the supply chain. So definitely, making sure that we can make farmers continue to get the inputs and things that they need, by kind of really expanding and testing a little bit both ways, both downstream and upstream. So those are some of the things we've been doing.
And what about demand for your marketplace service? So that's still relatively nascent, is it?
I mean, we've got, several £1,000s in terms of British pounds, obviously going through every week in terms of the marketplace. So, we have actually seen that people, farmers are still buying things, definitely. So, I think our retailers have said there's reduced footfall. So sometimes, they're making more use of the local delivery networks and things, for example, motorcycle drivers that already exist. So we are seeing that, and we are seeing more supply and stock shortages. So that's another area, why we're getting involved in some key aspects of that. But largely on the whole, farmers are still buying the things that are essential for them to, grow what they need to grow, for the animals and crops. So definitely still challenges, but, it is business that's essential, and farmers are still buying.
Mark, what about companies in your portfolio? How are they responding?
So India's had one of the more extreme lockdowns globally, right? Certainly for a country of 1.3 billion. Many of which are quite poor. It has been it was a very swift lockdown with almost no notice, and very strictly enforced. So the first 2 weeks were chaos, is the only way to describe it. Even though in theory the agricultural economy was supposed to be allowed to function, overzealous police and local administrators radically disrupted most businesses that were even critical. Thankfully, things have gotten a lot better since then, and we've seen a couple of trends. So, Louisa, you mentioned robots, right? In general, agriculture's recovery in India has been reasonably V-shaped, and agritech's has probably accelerated even from where things were a few months ago, right? So, if I look at companies like TOUTED, because farmers have had their traditional supply chain so radically disrupted, they need help from companies like TOUTED more than ever. So TOUTED has seen a surge of farmer interest and usage. We've seen that with clover in the greenhouse space, where greenhouse farmers that maybe were indifferent about selling locally versus selling through clover have come to clover and said, look, my local guy's gone, I need to work through you. So we've seen that every kind of platform, every marketplace has seen a big push relative to pre-COVID. I think automation and monitoring technologies have also taken off, right? We're seeing that with Tartan Sense, which is making robots for spraying on farms. There is more interest than ever because the alternative is letting 10 strangers, migrant laborers, pull weeds on your farm. And you'd rather not do that. You'd rather just do it yourself with some robotic support. We've seen that in Fussell, where people are saying, look, I don't want to move constantly between my farm, my city house or my townhouse and my farm if I can monitor remotely. And so in general, I think digitization solutions are seeing a very big push right now because of COVID. I don't want to, there's no reason to do a victory lap here. This is a huge human tragedy. But I think it has accelerated digitization trends that were already happening. And I think that's what we can expect in the next year or two. This is, it's an okay time for agritech, right? It's not as bad as it could have been.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We'd love to get some questions from the audience. Oh, I've just got the first one here from Vasudev. Thank you. He is asking, how does the startup landscape for a more upstream domain around plant breeding and other scientific aspects of trait selections look like in India? So that's
it looks terrible. Look, I've said it before. I can find more Indian life science entrepreneurs in 1 kilometer of greater Boston than I can find in all of India. Right? It's just a fact. We have an incredibly successful digital business model focused venture and startup ecosystem, and we have all when it comes to life sciences. And I don't actually really understand it. It boggles the mind a bit. Because India is not bad with respect to life sciences, very strong fine chemistry, pretty good fermentation-based biotech. There's just not a lot of entrepreneurship in the space. It feels like most of the, I think some of it may be because a lot of people who go for PhDs in life sciences who are Indian certainly go abroad, and then I don't think they come back in many cases, so we don't see the same levels of talent. But that's biotech broadly. Specifically with respect to plant breeding and genetics, I think I see almost nothing, and it's not that we don't scan the space. Some of that is probably because for many years now, really for about a decade, there has been no movement in biotech traits in India. The government has something called the AAC, and it's been at a standstill since 2009. So we haven't seen a new trait in 11 years. And if I were an entrepreneur and was told to was thinking about launching a biotech company focused on trait development, I wouldn't do it in India, right? There's zero regulatory clarity and no indication that what you build will ever be able to get commercialized. But that's very GM specific and doesn't really account for why we don't see more innovation in hybrid seeds, in computational biology. But it's certainly a gap. It's a huge gap in our ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. I've got another question here from Christian asking about vertical farming in India. Is there a need for that?
Look, I think let's make a distinction between poly houses and protected agriculture on one hand, and vertical farming. And the difference that whenever I'm trying to explain the two, I think the difference is LEDs, right? Are you providing your own light in an urban setting, or is this more like a greenhouse or a poly house? There is a huge need for poly houses in India, and whether those are soil based or hydroponic or aeroponic or whatever you want, those are certainly taking off. We made an investment, like I mentioned, in Clover, which is trying to build the largest greenhouse fresh produce brand in India, with a back end of smallholder greenhouse farming, greenhouse owning farmers. But there's certainly other people that are sort of doing it themselves with more premium hydroponic, purely hydroponic offerings. Mm-hmm. India has a lot of light. It has a lot of land. I'm not sure that we necessarily need American-style vertical farming there. That might have some interesting applications in cities for sort of microgreens, right? For what we call like methi and stuff like that. But I think the bigger play is in poly houses. Mm-hmm.
So we've got another question here about sustainability, which is interesting. What is the impact of sustainability on African and Indian farmers? Is it taken into consideration like in developed countries? Anita, do you have many farmers asking questions around having sustainable operations coming through WeFarm?
I mean, we do some of that, and it is a tricky question as well in terms of, how can we, for example, as WeFarm, actually influence that? And I think, there is, I guess, no easy answer, but it is absolutely something that, we should take into account. And one of the things that, we see and that we have in our plans is that, the more we can actually aggregate the kind of buying power and the purchasing power of the farmers, then the more we actually have the ability then to influence, the choices, not obviously by top down telling farmers what to do, but by giving them, the actual access to some of these things, better quality, better prices, and more information that they can be shared so that actually they can make those decisions. So we definitely see it as something that, yes, there's an education element to it, but also a lot of it is about, the buying power and the connections so that people actually can, have the ability to make different decisions. So that's something that I think as we grow and as we scale, we just obviously keep in mind. But yes, it's definitely a complicated question, and there's a lot of ways to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. Tatiana, Ben, can we just quickly see if Tatiana has a response to that question around sustainability?
Yes, definitely. We tie sustainability with responsibility, especially when you're looking at inputs in the environment. So we definitely ensure that our farmers, as they get into the shops to buy inputs, they have the right information on how to apply. And our technician actually goes to the when he visits the fields, he ensures that there is some training of new farmers that get into our network on how to use the different agrochemicals on the ground. And we are also making investments in having in the shelves organic fertilizers, organic herbicides. So just to try and replace the chemical inputs as well as they are available in the shelves and with affordable prices. So it's all it's possible that we have. So if you want to be in this market for a long time and ensure that the farmer is also able to produce on the right level and able to continue purchasing from us. So definitely the training and the demo plots, all those things are important for our business because it ensures continuity. Yes.
Thank you. Well, I think we've run out of time. There's a couple more questions, Mark, for you. Maybe you can type your responses in there.
Yeah, sure.
But thank you, everyone, very much. So I'll hand back over to Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I can't hear you, Ben.
Just my mic was off.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lousia. Mark, Tatiana, Anita, thank you for all your insights. It was a great discussion that has given quite a lot of insights to our audience, to our international audience. Just would like to remind everyone that there's a poll going. If you can just take a few minutes to go through the polls on your right-hand side, we will very much appreciate. So the next session will start in about 3 minutes. So we invite everyone to take some coffee and stretch the legs a bit, and then click on the sessions, and you will be able to see the 3 available parallel sessions, and you can choose whichever you would like to participate in. And you can, again, carry on posting your questions on the event tab as well as the session tabs. Thank you very much, and see you a bit later. Thank you.